Hello, everybody. This is Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And if you are watching the replay on our YouTube channel, Psychic Protection Sanctuary YouTube channel, go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell so you can get notifications when I upload new videos. I try to upload at least 2, if not 4 or 5 new videos each month on topics of psychic protection and personal empowerment. So, this is actually a Facebook Live that is taking place in one of my 2 Facebook groups, free Facebook groups. I have 2 community Facebook groups. This is the Spiritual Empowerment Community, and it is for people who are wanting to empower your life. And that can include a lot of different things, mindset work, healthy boundaries, self-care, and working on processing old traumas and relationships and all sorts of stuff. My other Facebook group is Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and that is specifically for people who are experiencing unwanted paranormal activity or who are feeling challenged with managing your energy. We do tend to talk about more intense topics in that particular group. And so actually over the past couple of years, I've realized there's some people who need both groups. There's some people who just need one and really don't want the more intense stuff. So that's kind of the thinking behind that. So welcome to our Facebook Live. This is our monthly Facebook Live that we have. And right now this video is taking place in, I had to think of what month we're in, July 2019. And so right now our schedule is that the monthly Facebook Live in this group, Spiritual Empowerment Community, is on the third Monday evening, monthly, at 6 p.m. Central Time. And the Facebook Live in my other group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary, is on the second Monday monthly, also at 6 p.m. So be sure to join us in either group, or you can just hang out on YouTube and watch the replays. So our topic for today is actually a very light topic, and a lot of times I cover more like grounded, nitty-gritty kind of spirituality. So this topic might sound a little more ethereal, but it's actually very, very grounded. So it's 3 steps to self-love. And let me just check here. I wanted to see if I'm seeing our comments or not. So, okay. So it's 3 steps to self-love. So we're going to start off by really talking about the nitty-gritty. Let's bring this down into the earth plane, okay? Because so often, and it's happening again, every time I get on Facebook Live, my nose itches. It's all of the energy, I guess. Totally have bedhead. Okay, so what I was going to say is that so often in spirituality today, it's very disembodied, and it's all about like, moving into 5D and, ascension and all this stuff, and all about love. That's all well and good, but it's a lot of like escaping your body and your life. I'm pointing up because a lot of spiritual seekers, their energy is like way up here and not embodied. So let's talk about, in a more embodied sort of way, why we need self-love. So if you, I just got a little notification. Hello, people who are joining. So we're going to do a little bit of brainstorming here. So if you are not practicing self-love, what are some of the negative things that can show up in your real life? Okay. And Jeannie is joining us from Piper, Kansas. So if you're not loving yourself, if you're not doing actions that exhibit love for yourself, then what are some of the things, what are some of the negative side effects that can happen? We also have Margaret joining us. Hello there. So I have a little list that I made, but I bet that you can think of some things as well. So when you're not practicing self-love, not just in an inner way, so both in an internal way, but also through your actions, how you're living in the world, these are some things that I wrote down, that I brainstormed. These are some things that can happen. So you can end up having problems with your relationships. So if you're not practicing self-love, that's a fast track to boundary issues. Like if you're not practicing self-love and you're saying yes to everyone else when you need to be taking care of yourself sometimes. So there can be really problematic boundary issues. There can also be issues of codependency, even victimization when you're putting yourself last, right? Oh, Jeannie, that's a good one. I didn't have that on my list. Isolation. So if you're not practicing self-love, that can result in isolation. I needed to hear that one. That's a good one. Thank you. And we have Billy joining us. Welcome. We're talking about the 3 steps to self-love. These are 3 things that I practice, and we're prefacing it by doing a little bit of brainstorming for, what happens if you're not practicing self-love. Overall, what I wrote down was living an unhappy or unsatisfied life, because you're just like not caring for yourself at all. It can also result in depression. Also with, let me write this down. Being depleted. How many of you feel really depleted? Like you are running on no fuel, right? So those are just a few ideas. And if you think of any more, feel free to share. Okay. So our topic for today is actually, it's not as in-depth as some of my other topics where I'm going on and on teaching a whole lesson, but that's okay, because these 3 tips are really potent. They are maybe obvious, perhaps, but you might not be practicing them. And so I'm here to just give you a loving reminder of these 3 tips, and one or more might really resonate for you. And so I invite you to practice whatever works for you. So, tip number 1 is, tip number 1 for self-love is self-soothing. So this is actually a technique that I learned from, well, I'm not sure what she calls it, but this is what I call it, self-soothing. This is a tip that I learned so a year ago. I was going through some very unusual, intense things, and so I went to a therapist, I think 3 times. We just had a few sessions. It was just a temporary situation. And but in our sessions there was one really big breakthrough, and I want to share it with you because you might do the same thing. So during this difficult situation, I was having a lot of really intense feelings, and so I would maybe feel like angry or maybe jealous, or any of those so-called quote negative feelings or reactions, right? And so then I would immediately try to shift those. I'd be like, oh my gosh, well, I need to forgive that person, because I didn't want to be like angry or jealous, or I don't even remember what other feelings I was having, because it's all processed and resolved now. But what I do remember is that I would immediately try to shift out of that. I would try to like evolve out of it. I'd be like, oh, let me process this stuff, because I don't want to have those negative feelings towards this person or that person or whatever. And as I was working with this therapist and journaling, I was journaling a lot. So I was doing a lot of my own work. And what I realized was that I was bypassing my own authentic reactions and feelings. I was bypassing myself, and I was just looking at them and how I was feeling and trying to like disengage that negative feeling. But instead, there was, and I don't remember exactly what the therapist said, that I remember her putting her hands on her chest and talking about self-soothing. And this is what clicked for me, was that instead of being like, oh no, I don't want to feel angry anymore because I don't want to be sending negative energy toward that person or whatever, right? Because we don't want to be sending negative vibes to somebody. But when I was trying to not have those feelings, I was abandoning myself. I was disengaging from myself, disengaging from my own feelings. So what I realized was that I needed to do, when I would have those moments when I was overwhelmed with those negative feelings, I needed to go into, oh, someone's delivering a package. I hope they don't knock on the door. Keeping it real. No, okay, he's knocking on the door, but hopefully he will go away. Hopefully, he left it. He left it. Amazon Prime package. So now I have to remember what I was saying. So when I would have those feelings, I would try to disengage from them, right? You get the picture. So instead, what I started doing was placing my hands on my heart, my palms on my heart, and just sending myself so much love. Sending that part of me that wasn't ready to forgive huge amounts of love. Sending that part of me that felt angry, that felt resentful, that felt defensive, or whatever, fill in the blank. Like I said, I don't even remember a lot of whatever the feelings that I was having, because I've already processed them and let them go. But whatever feelings you might be having, right? So just sending tons of love to that part of myself that was feeling those feelings. So nowadays we think of, I think the term inner child is pretty well known. Like there's this part of you within yourself that's the little child or the wounded child. But we also have like different parts of our personality. We have the inner teenager. We have all these different archetypes, and we don't even have to analyze what they all are. But I bring that up because sometimes when I would realize that I was having a really strong reaction to something or someone, and I would try to disengage from it, and I'd go, oh wait, I need to self-soothe. And so I would just pour love into whatever that part of myself was, my inner child or whatever. I didn't need to know what part of me it was. I would just pour love into myself. So I think in the New Age world, it's so common that we don't want to have any negative experiences. We don't want to feel anything negative. We don't want to, it's just like no negativity, right? And if we do have that come up, then we try to shift out of it as quickly as we can. And even though I've been very aware of the idea of spiritual bypassing and that practice of trying to bypass your feelings, and I've been very consciously trying to not do that, I realized that in that situation a year ago, I was sort of doing that still. And so rather than spiritually bypassing, like, oh no, I want to stay high vibe. I want to hurry up and process this. I want to forgive this person. In doing that, I was abandoning myself and not giving myself self-love. So this was like this amazing little, so simple technique. And I want you to do it with me right now. So just, you can even rub your hands together just to open your hand chakras, and you just place your palms over your heart center and just send love into yourself. Just send love. Self-love, self-soothing. If you're feeling intense or if it feels appropriate, you can also like pat your heart. This is one thing that the therapist showed me, is pat your heart. That's the self-soothing. Or just like, it's okay, you know, self-soothing. Or those of you who are into tapping, if you know what that is, you can kind of take that idea, and if it's feeling really intense right here, you can tap just to help release a little bit, and then go into the self-soothing. So I think I do it a little bit different than the therapist was doing a lot of patting. For me, I end up just sending tons of love into myself. Just sending love. So when I feel angry with someone, I send love to that part of me that's angry. When I feel resentful towards someone or about something, I send love. And total acceptance, by the way. Love, unconditional love to that part of me that feels that. When I feel jealous, that's a really charged one. A lot of people are like, oh no, we don't want to ever admit that we feel jealous because that's unspiritual. Well, I'm going to tell you, let's keep it real. Let's not lie to ourselves anymore. Okay? Don't lie to yourself. It happens sometimes. Okay? I'm not, I think we have different personality types, obviously, in the world, and I don't tend toward jealousy. Some people do, but I still feel it sometimes. So don't lie to yourself. That part of you, so if you have this moment where you feel this surge of jealousy, send unconditional love to that part of you that feels jealous. Send unconditional love to that part of you that isn't ready to forgive or that doesn't want to forgive. Send unconditional love to that part of you that's stubborn or that doesn't know the way or that feels lost, or fill in the blank. Okay? So it's literally about like not trying to shift away from that feeling or from that experience, but just sending literally unconditional love and acceptance. Just sending love. Just pour it into yourself rather than trying to clean up, well, I don't want to feel that way toward that person. It's like this little miracle, because when you just pour self-love into yourself, even though you're not trying to stop feeling, not feeling whatever it is, pouring love and acceptance into that part of yourself ends up disengaging the power that that feeling has over you. And so it's this like little magic trick. And so we have more people who've joined us. So hello, everybody. And we are doing 3 steps to self-love. And the number 1 is self-soothing. Hands over the heart. Sending unconditional love to whatever is coming up, especially the difficult stuff. Okay? And these 3 things are things that I do myself that work for me. And I encourage you to utilize whatever works for you. Number 2, and by the way, feel free to share. We don't have a lot of, you guys aren't very talkative today. That's okay, but don't be shy if you have anything that you want to share. Okay? So number 2 is this really great practice, and it is, what would someone who loves themselves do? What would someone who loves themselves do? So at random times during the day, and especially at moments when you are making a decision about something, or making a decision about your time, or figuring out what to say to someone if you're struggling with what to say, you ask yourself this question: what would someone who loves themselves do right now? And I'll give you an example for myself. I was, let's see, it was one of the days last week. Oh, it was, I usually take Thursday and Friday off for my weekend. And it was Wednesday, and I had tons of work to do. I was still doing work, and I was like, oh, I have so much to do. Maybe I should just continue working on Thursday and get caught up, or I could just work for a couple of hours more on Wednesday, and then whatever doesn't get done, and I'll work on it when I get back to work on Saturday. But I was like, so my tendency, I had very, very strong conditioning growing up to be workaholic and to work all the time. And so my immediate reflex was, well, of course I'm going to work on Thursday, which is my Saturday. I'm going to work the whole day. I'll just take Friday off and get my grocery shopping and my laundry done, and barely have a weekend. But the thing was I was feeling tired, though. I had worked with a lot of clients, and I was finished. I had this pile of work to do, preparing for my classes, my programs, and everything that I do with my students. And I was like, I tuned in. I'm like, I feel I'm just starting to feel depleted. And I remembered this magic question: what would someone who loves themselves do? And I was like, oh, yeah. Someone who loves themselves would take their full weekend, especially since I was already just on the verge, just barely starting to feel that emotional depletion. I don't know about you guys, but when I get right to the edge, I start to feel it. It's more than just physical fatigue or mental fatigue. It's like, I need to take a day off. So what would someone who loves themselves do? Oh yeah, I would take the day off. Now, in someone else's situation, if they've had kind of the opposite issue where they have a hard time getting motivated to work, and maybe they take too many days off, and so they've lagged behind in some really important tasks, then maybe their answer would be the other way around. What would someone who loves themselves do? Well, I would take my weekend, and I would get some important work done, and I would get caught up. So it's different in every moment. Like for me, another time the answer might have been the opposite, but but the question is the same. What would someone who loves themselves do? And you ask yourself that all throughout the day. You just random times during your day, you ask yourself that question. And I actually, there was a video by Teal Swan, and she talked about this practice. Now, I just want to say, I know some of you follow Teal Swan, some of you don't like Teal Swan, and I'm not promoting her or bashing her or either way. I'm just saying that I got this idea from one of her videos. And with all spiritual teachers, I take from her stuff what resonates for me, and I leave the rest. So I occasionally will watch some of her videos, and some of her other videos don't resonate for me. So anyway, that was just a little teachable moment there. As I know that you are all navigating all this stuff out in the spiritual world, and a big thing that's been coming up, I think, for a lot of people is how to discern what teachers are okay and what teachings are good and not good. So take what resonates and leave the rest. Okay, back to our scheduled topic. That's your practice. Oh, and a reason why I brought up Teal Swan also is because she said that if you practice that for an entire year, your life will change. And so I've been practicing that. I don't remember when I came across the video, but I know I started practicing it right away. But being realistic, after I don't know how many weeks, I sort of started to forget about it. But what would someone who loves themselves do if they forgot about it? They wouldn't beat themselves up or make themselves bad for forgetting about it. And I didn't either. So I was like, okay, no big deal. Let's just start again right now. So I try to keep remembering to ask myself that question. So I've reinitiated that. So that's a great daily practice. I was just thinking maybe something to help remember to do that would be to create like a big sign or a sticky note on your bathroom mirror or something. And the thing is with the sticky note thing is that if you leave it in one place, eventually you kind of forget about it, or your brain just kind of ignores it. So like every couple of weeks, move it to a different location, and then it will be on the top of your mind. Your brain won't ignore it, if that makes sense. So that's practice number 2. What would someone who loves themselves do? Asking yourself that question. And number 3, we're going to do some brainstorming. So get your typing fingers ready. This is, I know you guys have been really quiet, but this part depends on you all. Okay, so tip number 3 is that every day you do one act of self-love or self-nurturing. Now you can do more than one, but the goal is to be very intentional about that one. So thinking about one thing that would really feed you, that would support you. And so let's do some brainstorming right now. If you were to do one act of self-love today, what would that be? Or tomorrow? Okay, so just start sharing some things. I'm going to just think of some things off the top of my head. One idea that popped into my head is take a nice bath. I actually, that's not really a good one for me right now. I have the tiniest bathtub in the universe, and so that's not fun for me at my current place. But when I had this really humongous bathtub at the last place that I lived, that was awesome. I would put Epsom salts and create a whole like detox relaxation thing. Now every day you choose one thing to do. So I might not do that every single day. I might do something else the next day. Okay. Sandy says, get a massage. Yeah, that's a good one. For me, an act of self-love that's part of my routine when I'm on top of things, and that is that I have random times during the day when I'm working from home and on my days off, when I will go outside and put my bare feet on the ground, weather permitting, and meditate. And for me, my form of meditation is not about escaping out into the ethers. It's about just sitting quietly in presence, and maybe my eyes will be closed and I'll focus on my breathing and really bringing my energy back in, any dispersed energy back in, or I'll have my eyes open and I'll just attune to my environment. I'll listen to the birds, I'll listen to the breeze, and just be really present. That's an act of self-love for me. The opposite of that is like not taking, for me, is to not take time for that and to keep working. on whatever. Just keep working. And so that's a big act of self-love for me. And have you noticed that when you do these little acts of self-love, that you have more energy to give to other people because you've filled your cup? Jeannie's idea is talk nice to myself. Yes, exactly. So positive self-talk instead of the negative or beating yourself up kind of stuff. So one act of self-love. So for some of us, an act of self-love is something nutritional or health-wise, like making a smoothie or taking our supplements or our medication. That's an act of self-love. Getting enough rest. Some people who are really work focused or who have kids and a whole bunch of responsibilities, the first thing that goes is their sleep. They don't get enough hours of sleep. So what about giving yourself that act of self-love by going to bed earlier or allowing yourself to sleep in and, maybe let your partner get the kids up in the morning or whatever. You don't have to feel guilty about those acts of self-love. And I want to be super clear that that when you do those acts of self-love, it allows you to also be of higher service and support to those around you. So often we do it the other way around where we're trying to give to everyone, but we're not doing these acts of self-love. So in the end, we're actually ending up giving less quality of ourselves to the people and situations in our life because we're depleted, okay, emotionally, physically, vibrationally, etc. But when we give ourselves tons of love and do these acts of self-love with wild abandon, then we actually end up being able to give people more and higher quality. And really, I live by the idea of less is more. So for example, if you have kids, and I'm not telling you how to parent or not parent, but this is just an idea. So let's say if you have the entire weekend with your kids, well, and you're a little bit tired. Well, what if there was a way, I don't know what the logistics are for you, but what if there was a way for you to take all of Saturday morning for yourself, or some other time frame to go to a yoga class or just sleep in extra late and do nothing, or take a bath or go get a massage or meet up with a friend, and then spend the rest of the time with your kids. And then in doing so, you will have filled yourself up and you're that much more present with your kids. You're that much more happy to be there with them. You're choosing it, right? Years and years ago, I was a school teacher. It was 25 years ago. And this is just a really great example of, and it doesn't have to be kids, but it's just a great, someone's calling. It's just a really great example of how we give ourselves to other people, how we give our energy. So I had been very programmed to be a workaholic. So I was at school. I was one of those teachers that was at school all the time, and I was working on the weekend, and then I would go home and clean the house, and then do more work. I would go back. I would go to school on Saturday and work. And I started to get really burned out after a while. And when I would show up on Monday, I would be like, wasn't I just here? I think I was a good teacher no matter what, but internally I could really feel it. And I remember after one school year, I was like, oh God, I was just so burned out. And this was after only a couple of years of teaching. So the next year I really had a different approach. And on the weekends, I would go on little road trips. I would drive by the school on my way out of town. because it was right by where you got on the highway where I was living. And so I would just drive by and I'd be like, oh, there's that place I go to during the week. Like I really like mentally unplugged from it, whereas before I was too enmeshed. And then when I would come back on Monday, I would be like really happy to be there and excited. So, whether we're talking about your work or your kids or your grandkids or whatever aspects of your life, your spouse, that you're giving all of your focus and your attention to, I firmly believe that when you give yourself all of those acts of self-love and you take really good care of yourself, then you are able to give a much higher quality. It's like less is more, right? You're able to give much better to whoever you're giving to. Or, if you work with clients or customers or students, then you're giving so much more and you're able to be more fully present with them because you've given yourself all of the self-love and self-nurturing that you need. So Jeannie has another idea for an act of self-love: taking a break when I know I need it. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I don't see any other ideas coming through, but those of you who are watching the replay later, I want you to make a little list of some different acts of love that you can start to apply in your own life. And I am going to, there's something that I've struggled with for a long time that my act of self-love that I'm going to try to, nope. I always tell my sister when she says she's going to try to do something, I always quote Yoda. I say, there is no try, there is only do. Or I think he worded it differently, but Yoda, that's what he said, words of wisdom. So I'm not going to try, I'm going to do this. My act of self-love this week that I'm going to apply is to go to bed earlier than usual. And I think I'm going to have to do that in increments, because if I go to bed way earlier, then I can't fall asleep and I sleep poorly all night. So I'll have to figure out a little incremental way to do that. Because I am working out of town this weekend at a psychic fair, and that means I have to get up early. And when I get into this staying up late mode, then the first day of the fair, I'm really sleepy and I need a lot of coffee. So my act of self-love is to get myself on a different sleep schedule. Now, sometimes our act of self-love is about pampering and nurturing and giving ourselves lovely things, fluffy things. And sometimes the act of self-love is about discipline, like it's about disciplining ourselves to apply a better habit, if that makes sense. So Jeannie says another act of self-love is turning off the news. Yeah, so for you, that can be an act of self-love. I know for some people, they will limit how much news they're watching. For another person, it might be the other way around, where if their practice has been to like bypass and just live in spiritual la la land up here, then maybe an act of self-love would be about making sure that they watch the news for, or listen to the news for like 30 minutes a week, so that they're aware of what's happening on the planet, so that they can send prayers and positive intentions. And so I'm just explaining that depending on who you are, your acts of self-love are going to be different from other people. So Jeannie says that makes a lot of sense. Okay, you guys, so this was a bit of a shorter one. A lot of times I go for an hour or longer, but this topic was pretty simple. It's the 3 steps to self-love. The first one is anytime you have really negative feelings that are coming up, instead of trying to disengage those feelings Instead, you let them be, you let yourself feel it, and just send that part of you huge amounts of self-love, unconditional self-love. So that's number one. Unconditional self-love, self-soothing. Number two, every day, as you go through your day, what would someone who loves themselves do? What would someone who loves themselves do? Now, I want to throw in here, I didn't mention this before, but I have done a lot of intentional work myself with boundaries, with setting healthy boundaries with people, and with confidence issues. And a lot of people who know me now as the person that I am now would not even dream that I used to be a huge doormat, a big spiritual doormat. I was. I won't even go into all the stuff that I let people do in the past. And I played a part in that because I allowed it. But when I would think about speaking up, I would get so nervous. I would get confused. I'd be like, wasn't sure if I should speak up. But that's, by the way, a very common pattern with people who were raised with a lot of abuse, which I was. And so as I was healing that and intentionally working on having more appropriate, healthier boundaries and not allowing abuses, there were many, many times when I had to ask myself the question, what would someone who loves themselves do in this circumstance? Because my tendency in the past was to be too passive and to be afraid to speak up, to be afraid to defend myself or to ask for what I needed. And so it was like a mantra all the time. I had to say, what would someone who loves themselves say right now? What would someone who loves themselves do in this circumstance? What would someone who loves themselves say right here? Okay. So I had to just keep applying it and applying it and applying, asking myself that question all the time until it became more automatic. So you guys, when I talk about boundaries and self-love, this is not something that I just excelled at in the beginning. And that's why I like to teach it to all of you, because I've been there and I've worked a lot of this stuff out within myself. And then tip number 3 is every day apply one act of self-love intentionally. And of course you can do 100 acts of self-love every day. Make everything an act of self-love. I think that's a great way to live. As you're cooking your meal, you're being very intentional. I'm making this food as an act of self-love to feed myself. Imagine how much differently you would eat if you were doing that. When you go to sleep, this is an act of self-love. When you go to work, this is an act of self-love. That would be an amazing practice. But at the very least, one act of self-love daily. Start with that, because I know in our culture, it's like, so it's ingrained in us to put ourselves last. So we're going to unplug from that collective consciousness that says we're supposed to put ourselves last, and that putting ourselves first is selfish or that it's bad. Instead, we're going to focus on one act of self-love, and knowing that it's not selfish because it allows you to give more when you do that. It's actually more selfish, I think, to allow yourself to become depleted and depleted emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's more of an act of self-love and love towards others to fill yourself up. So Jeannie says, that's so funny, big spiritual doormat. Yeah, that was me. Even 10 years ago, big time. And Jeannie says, that's me, afraid to speak up. Great advice. Yeah. And Jeannie says, I love that. Everything is an act of self-love. Well, I think we are all done for tonight. As always, I'm sending you all my love. Ooh, I do have one announcement. Let me look at my calendar here. Okay, so we do have a big event coming up in a couple of weeks in this Facebook group, Spiritual Empowerment Community. And what I've been trying to do twice a year is to have what's called a Facebook challenge. I don't know why they call it a Facebook challenge, but it's basically it's an online event where we have stuff every day. So this particular one coming up is July 29th is the first day. It's the 7-day energy tune-up. And we're going to meet on Facebook Live at 7 p.m. I'm sure that that's the right time. 7 p.m. Central Time, so adjust to your time zone. And we're going to have a brief lesson and a guided meditation. And those of you who have done my guided meditations before, I'm just going to tell you what a lot of my students have said over the years, that they love these guided meditations and they are super powerful. That's not me saying that. That's them. They love those. So you're going to get a little tidbit of that every day. So we'll have an opportunity to share, say hello to each other. I'll be sharing a teaching and we'll be doing some energy shifting. Every single day, there's going to be energy work that's done through this guided meditation. And it is a 7-day long journey, and it's totally free. Totally free. No expectations. Just if it resonates for you, then join us in the Facebook group. And if you would like more information about my other offerings, be sure to visit my website, www.psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. And you're welcome, Jeannie, and everybody else joining live. You all have been very quiet tonight, and that is okay. Sending you all my love, and I will see you next time. Bye.